This is the Nomad Futurist podcast, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and transformation. Connect with us, share your thoughts with us at nomadfuturist.com. Let's get this started. Here are Phil and Nabil. Hello. This is Nabil Mahmood from Hawaii.
This is Philip Koblenz from Brooklyn, New York.
This is Christian Koch joining you from New York City.
Christian, welcome to the Nomad Futurist podcast. Let's start with a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and where you're at in your career.
Yeah, sure. So I got into, the telecom space back in the late 90s and spent a big portion of my career as a network engineer and kind of shifted away from that maybe 6 or 7 years ago and got more on the business side of things into the kind of the planning around interconnection and acquisition of network assets. And now I'm currently focusing on product management for our cloud and ecosystem over at a company called Packet Fabric.
You know, beyond that, you're selling yourself way short, man. You are now also a newsletter writer. You're an amateur analyst. So you have a significant interest in kind of our world. Let's start early on. I mean, you're a fairly young guy. So late 90s would mean you got into this industry fairly young. How old were you when you got started?
19, 18. So right after high school. I should have graduated high school in 1998. But I left high school in 1997. Okay, and then I never went to college.
Oh, my God. So, I mean, we have a true Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates situation.
This is my number 74 for black T-shirt.
So this is that we're staring at. I don't know if we'll make this video available, but we're staring at the Christian Koch uniform right now. So watch out. The next Steve Jobs is in front of us. So let's delve into that a little bit. Like I mentioned in our kind of pre-interview, our demographic, our target demographic are kids trying to figure out, why they would choose the critical infrastructure industry and the associated industries. Status that we're in has obviously shown that, technology is incredibly important. But you have a unique story because you started so young. So how does one go from senior, sophomore in high school to getting into telecom?
Yeah, I mean, look, I did grunt work. I was running cable for high-speed internet in hotels when it was first coming out and punching down DSLAM blocks in the basement. It wasn't necessarily fun, but it was a segue into doing something that wasn't sitting in school.
You were where did you grow up?
I was born in Brooklyn and grew up in North New Jersey, and that's where I went to school.
And are all those jobs around that area, or have you traveled around a bit?
Yeah, no, initially they were in that area. I remember the first hotel I did was in Secaucus by the Meadowlands.
All right, so you haven't strayed very far. Still in New York City.
How did you really get into it? What's the driving force for you not finishing school and getting into that space?
I was in school and I didn't like it, and I was trying to think about what it was I did like. And I remember, I think maybe when I was in middle school, I guess they call it 8th grade, 7th grade, right before high school, was that I was building my own computer and just messing around on the internet back when bulletin board systems were a thing and you had a dial-up modem. And I kind of thought back to that and just kind of looked at what can I do, and that's kind of what brought me to, hey, I can run cable. It seems pretty easy. And that just kind of led me into wondering how it really worked.
Well, that's a big move at a very early age. That shows extreme signs of maturity. And I'm glad that you have shared this story with our listeners. So let's talk a little bit further about that. As far as your career is concerned, you progressed from punching cables to where you're at right now. What was the big transition? What led you to the next step in your career and advancement?
So I guess, I got interested in how does the whole internet and networks work, right? I'm running the cables, I'm doing these punch downs, and I ended up taking the next step, getting a job with Fordham University. And at Fordham University, I was kind of doing the same thing, as a network technician and running cables. I learned how to install and rack switches and other network gear. And, the primary network engineers or administrators, as they actually called it back then, started teaching me how to log into Sun servers and Unix servers and what it all meant and Cisco switches and a whole bunch of stuff, right? And then I just kind of started reading on my own, and from there, it's just kind of been, this is really interesting. Let me read and absorb as much information as I can and see where it takes me.
Well, this is a great example of being self-taught. It's really derivative from having that personality of constant education. That's really a message to our listeners and the younger folks, that you shouldn't be afraid of joining the data center market. You should not be afraid of joining the technology market segment. It's the foundation, the core of the future. However, there's got to be some sort of a level of interest in understanding the foundation elements. And there's a lot of resources, a lot of tools, a lot of people that are willing to mentor and support anyone's journey for that matter. And that really is what makes Nomad Futurist. In the course of your learning curve and where you're at in your career, what would you say is your primary skill or a unique skill that you've actually developed to be successful?
I'm probably going to say it's observability. And what drives that is just my kind of endless curiosity into how things work and why things are the way they are.
Curiosity is, I mean, that is, if anything, if I had to talk about in my career, what it was the difference between a key differentiator, let's say, between me and anyone else, it's the idea that, we were interested in the varying elements of, what went into providing a mission critical service. So yes, you can get into, the underlying elements of what it takes to run a data center, but for the stuff that goes into a data center, like what do those servers do? How do they work? And, one of the things I've mentioned in previous episodes of the podcast was that, with my children, I have two small children. I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they started using technology incredibly early. Obviously they know how to use the iPhone better than me before they could walk. And what I'm trying to instill in them is this idea of not how technology works, but why technology works. And I think there's a key distinction there that would help anyone that's really coming from any other career or any other background that is utilizing technology to really find value and how to pursue technology as a career, even if it's not necessarily something you're formally trained in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep on delving into your early career a little bit. So you start understanding, you start logging into these Sun servers. You're in the you're now understanding how, to a certain extent, the sausage is made. Then what? You're at Fordham University. Then what happens?
Then I guess I started understanding networks a little bit more and systems and kind of how it all works, right? We basically deployed a cable modem system for the dorm. So every dorm got its own cable modem. So we installed the CMTS and everything that makes an RF plant and all that. I think I just kind of was like, how does it get bigger from here? Right? Like, what do networks look like on the internet? Like, this is just a school. And from there, I actually had got pinged by a recruiter from Globix, which was ISP data center provider during and probably even before the .com bust in New York. And I went over there and I worked in the NOC. So it's like the NOC that I always saw in the pictures when I was like doing all my research. It was literally, a dark room with all these screens. The screens didn't work. Maybe one of them did, and it, had a monitoring system on it, but the rest were out. Maybe there's one screen that had CNN, and you had people sleeping. This is kind of at the end of Globix's tenure, right? Like the heydays are gone, but it was still super interesting for me because I got to learn and actually really see how a large internet network was operated.
So, Christian, I often get this question asked, and I can share a few stories after I hear your answers. The fact that, the younger generation is a little bit afraid of getting into our space because they might not have a degree. They might not have gone to college for people to excel and get these opportunities that you're in. In your career and your experience, what were your findings? Was that a barrier to your success, or was it acceptable because of the skill set and the abilities that you developed over the years?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it was welcomed. And what I've ended up seeing over time was there's actually a lot of folks in network engineering. I put them in two camps, actually. I've met a lot of network engineers with psychology degrees, and then I've met a lot of network engineers that have no degrees. So, college is cool and all, but I've never seen it required. A lot of the people I've met have not went to college. Nobody's ever looked at my resume during a job interview and said, "Oh, you didn't go to school." If it came up, but they never pointed it out, or I never didn't get an interview because of it.
I think that's another interesting thing about, the technology space in general is given, we're similar ages, you and I, but we're so early in this industry that there is no going to school for what we do specifically. I mean, maybe now obviously you have programming languages and other types of, vocational schools and whatnot. But when, the internet, came out or whatever to the mass public, there was no way you could be trained for it. So the people that are, the most experienced, the most capable, the most, to a certain extent, successful engineers are the ones that, essentially invented the problem, invented the solution, and came up at a time when we've essentially been inventing it as we go. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, when I was in high school, we had automotive shop and pottery class. Right. There was computer science. That's what it was called. That was it, just one class, right? And, now, I mean, we're seeing high schools with Cisco Networking Academy in it. And, there's a lot more opportunities, and there's a lot more opportunities to learn on your own if you want. And I mean, you could just see the amount of kids that are starting companies that are in high school. I just read about a kid who started a company in college and sold it while he was in college and is now living the dream, I guess.
And I assume you were angry that you weren't that kid. I assume the first thought you had wasn't pride; it was anger. But I know you too well. I think that's the issue. So, okay, Fordham. You learn the thing. You're essentially inventing the idea of turnkey office space. You're inventing the idea of, high-speed internet to a particular room, which now we take for granted because anyone, particularly in the city. So you do that. And what year is it now? Is it 2000, 2002, 2003? Globix?
Man, 2006.
Right.
Somewhere around there.
2006. You are now essentially a network ninja, right? That is your career today. How do you go from entering the knock in Globix, literally right before they just completely blew up and went away, to becoming a network ninja? What's next? During
the time at Globix, QTS, another data center provider, came in and acquired the company. What happened was Globix sold off its European business to Telecity. Then they sold the actual data center down on 139 Center Street.
Because the real estate was worth more than the data center.
And they sold it to like some investors looking to build medical offices or something like that. And they didn't sell the company yet, though. They sold that building before they sold the company, and then they finally sold the company to QTS. Bought it, but they had to move out and they had nowhere to go. So you can thank Rich Lucas for architecting this deal from Bank Street. And they ended up buying NTT Data in Jersey City, 95 Christopher Columbus. And, we slept on the data center floor. We moved servers. Half the people, because they're New Yorkers, gave us the finger and said, I don't want to go to New Jersey. And I want my servers to be in New York City because it's convenient for me. And, we kind of moved along. We made that all happen. And then, down the road, QTS was like, hey, you interested in moving to California? We need some folks out at our Santa Clara facility. So I said, sure, why not? Warmer weather, no snow, Silicon Valley. Could be fun. Headed out there. And I think I stayed with QTS for maybe, the next year after, seeing and being exposed to Silicon Valley and all of the high tech. And that's when I ended up joining another startup that was, doing aggregating instant messaging into the browser. And they were name was Meebo, who later got acquired by Google.
All right. So they get acquired by Google. What year are we at? Are we at?
So we are at like 2011 now. I think the acquisition was 2011, 2012.
You're basically you're part of these startups that maybe our listeners have never heard of Meebo, right? But a lot of the things that you saw at that part of your career are now things that people take for granted. The ability to do things like instant messaging in a browser. I mean, that sounds a lot like the way people are communicating with social media these days. Obviously everyone is gung ho about Slack, which is another aggregation mechanism. But that's what I'm talking about. This notion that the guy that was in high school and is running cable is now essentially at the forefront of creating or helping to create something that seems like unbelievably complex, but is now just a few short years later, I mean, it doesn't really seem like that long ago, just in terms of years, something that is just built in to every device. Where do we go from Meebo? What's next after Meebo?
Yeah. So it's crazy. So from there, I went over and joined Twitter.
Never heard of them. What do they do?
Yeah, they're also do some kind of social networking. Yeah, so I think the part, while still at Meebo, I moved to San Francisco after living in Mountain View because I just needed a little. I love cities. I needed a little bit more density. It was a little bit too quiet, and from then I joined Twitter. Was a network engineer there, initially focused on security, and then I started focusing on all the backbone and core networking, and I didn't really touch data center networking, but mostly backbone, interconnection, all the peering stuff, and stayed there through the IPO, which was wild. I could still remember. It was like, man, I was just like you say. I was some time ago. It didn't feel long that I was running cables, and now I just joined a Silicon Valley startup and went through an IPO.
And not just the Silicon Valley startup. I mean, probably the most recognized name at this point in social media, right? I mean, thanks in no small part to the fact that it's the primary communication mechanism for the head of our country. But yeah, I mean that trajectory I think is incredible, and it's something that I think people think about in terms of like a movie script. They'll see, whatever the Vince Vaughn movie where he goes to Google University and he becomes like, Mr. Web 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever version we're on now. But, you basically lived it, right? You left high school because it was boring and you ended up essentially taking Twitter public.
Yeah.
That to
all
me
thanks
is,
to me.
Yeah.
If only they gave me the stock.
Yeah. Well,
I thought that's the reason why you were wearing the black shirt. Well, it's after Twitter.
So after Twitter, took a role at Microsoft, and kind of that was my step away from engineering, which may look backwards to most folks, right? They kind of go to the big companies and then go to the newer startups. But I went to Microsoft, moved back to New York, with my now fiance, and worked at Microsoft and focusing on interconnection strategy, looking at internet exchanges and where to connect all over the world.
Let's talk a little bit about from the leadership perspective that you have gained over the years. What are some of the recommendations that you would have for the younger generation that's potentially looking to get into our space, and suggest that they follow a particular path, go to school, get some education, get started in it early, choose their passion, and move forward?
Yeah, I mean, there is no path to take, right? And I think, mine is a pretty clear indication or example of that. And don't follow your passion. That's the dumbest advice anybody will give you. I mean, I've seen this all over the place, and don't follow your passion. Maybe when you're rich, you can follow your passion and it doesn't matter anymore, but don't follow your passion.
I think we found the headline for the podcast. Don't follow your passion is going to be the,
No, but look, it's explore, try a few different things, find what you're interested in. And, maybe you'll be passionate about something you find along the way, but don't say, I'm passionate about building networks and that's what you're going to do. Because I don't know how many people are really passionate about building networks until they actually get to go do it. But that's it, explore, be curious, focus on the people. Every company is about the number one thing every company is about is the people. One of the best lines that, I've learned to love from a couple of years ago, that is from Ben Horowitz's book, is the most important things in the business are the people, products, and then the profits. Without people, you're not going to have great products. And without great products, you're not going to have profits. So focus on, being around great people.
Well, that's a great advice. Thank you very much for that. What do you wish you had known when you started out?
I have a pretty big appetite for risks. That's for sure. And I don't know. You just got to go for it. Like, you only live once, right?
Your advice to your younger self is continue to do everything the way you did it. Just just do your thing. Or is there something you wish you had known that you now know that other than make sure Twitter gives you more stock before?
Yeah. I guess I didn't actually answer Nabil, but I wouldn't change anything. Just go ahead, and I don't wish I knew anything different. It's because then I might have ended up in a different place, right? You're
really happy for what you've been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
that's incredible. I mean, a lot of people in our age or older are actually still trying to find out what are they going to do when they grow up, and or what the perfect place for them to be is. So what you do for life, and like Phil and I mean, the market segment that we're engaged in is relatively very complicated, and we've got our own ways of learning. How do you continue to learn and stay on top of things in this constantly evolving market space?
Oh, man. So, like I said, I've always been kind of curious, right, about, why things are the way they are, how things work and all that. And maybe 3 years ago, I looked at our market, our industry, and I said, most of the media out there, it sucks, right? There's just a bunch of crap websites. They look like they're 20 years old. They all publish the same content, which are just pulling off press releases, and there's no depth in it, right? So, and I looked at it and I said, man, I just want a simple summary to know what happened, what's important that I need to know in the industry, right? And I said, well, seems like newsletters are becoming popular again, and this is 2016. I'll try to create a newsletter. So I create a newsletter and I just curate stories from the web. And eventually I've, honed in my process and, use a bunch of different tools and apps to make this all happen. But, I eventually just started curating that and sending out this newsletter. It goes out to like 5,600 people today. So it's still growing. I'll celebrate when I hit 10,000 and it, grows a little faster, but I just started curating the news, and over time, I just realized what's important that people should know about, right? Because there's a lot of fluff out there, and it basically just came down to collecting all of the PR and financial filings and company filings from all of these companies in our industry in one place, and then sorting through it and getting past all that fluff that is typically pushed out there.
All right, so let me do a comparison here. The way people typically answer that question is they'll say, I go to this website or I go to that website or I read, Car and Driver, Popular Science or whatever, magazine you can put your hands around. I want to make sure that everyone is clear as to what Christian Koch is saying. He is saying that in order to feel the pulse of what's going on in his world, he's reading financial filings, he is joining analyst calls, he's sifting through press releases, picking out what he thinks is interesting and putting it in a newsletter for other people to be able to, not have to do all of that work. Enter, what is it called? The Foundations newsletter?
Yep, Foundations.
You're going to reach 10,000 quickly, of course, because you're on the Nomad Futurist podcast. I mean, that is an incredible way to get news. And it speaks to one characteristic that I think defines who you are as someone who has general curiosity, and that's confidence. I found this after I graduated college, and a few years later when I had my friends who were essentially just like people we got drunk with, they started becoming lawyers and doctors and stuff. And I got this feeling as though, I had always looked at those types of people as, especially doctors. I always looked at doctors like they have all the answers. And if anything goes wrong, they're going to be able to solve the problem for me, until my friends started becoming doctors. I was like, wait a minute, that guy's just a regular schmuck. And he's a doctor. And the idea that, and I think this is incredibly important for our listeners, the idea that you need to be confident in your curiosity, confident in questioning why something happens, and not so scared that you're going to, spin it wrong or understand it wrong or interpret it incorrectly. Because the people that are putting out this information, the people that have created these companies that you think are like unattainable, the Twitters, the Facebooks, they're just people. And there's an answer to how they got to where they are. And, we talk about how complex our world is. And at the end of the day, it's not really all that complex if you strip it down to the fact that it is still copper touching copper and glass touching glass and large, air-conditioned rooms. And a bunch of fancy software and GUIs to, automate certain processes. But I don't know. I don't even know what the question is. Just respond.
Good statement, Phil. I agree.
I think Christian has got a great political career in front of him. All of that was fake news, and he's going to make his own news. So let's talk a little bit about the monkey in the room, as I call it. some call it the elephant in the room. In the current state of affairs, what are some of the biggest hurdles and what are some of your strategic focuses?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I'm just kind of staying on track and focusing on what I focus on. And I kind of ignore a lot of the current state of affairs. And I try to not, watch or read mainstream news. And sometimes I actually have no idea what's going on in the world. I'm just kidding. Mostly I always do, but I do really not try to read any of that stuff just because I'm focused on, trying to, make a difference in our industry and, making sure that new people and younger people do have places to learn and places to go and connect with each other, like NINOG, and just kind of making sure that they have people to reach out to that if they want to. And, that's kind of it. I'm just staying curious.
I mean, you've been working from home for years, right? It's not like you have the traditional, I go to an office every day, so I'm particularly disrupted. I don't think you have any little kids, pitter patters of little feet running around your house. So in that sense, you haven't really been disrupted in the way you work. But given what you've seen, what what your understanding of the industry in general, based on your amateur analyst background, notwithstanding the fact that you're the network ninja at Packet Fabric, clearly you must have seen some changes in behavior across the spectrum of the way people do networking. I mean, you were traveling all over the place, going from conference to conference to conference, and within the last 60 days, I don't think you've been doing a lot of traveling. So what disruptions have you seen that you can pinpoint, and what of those disruptions do you think are potentially beneficial, will potentially accelerate some digital transformation or network transformation plans that you have insight into? What do you think the permanence is to to the way people are doing business today versus how they were doing business, let's say, 62 days ago?
Yeah, so I think I'll touch on 2 points then with this. For one, events and conferences, our industry, probably not just our industry, but multiple industries have a conference problem and an event problem. Not only are there your core kind of industry groups like, network operator groups and things like that, but there are companies producing conferences that are strictly for-profit businesses, right? And commercial purposes. There are all kinds of other events that come along. Maybe they're nonprofit, maybe they're for-profit. Then there are every company now that gets traction wants to have their own event. So I think that we're going to see, recalibration across the industry as far as these conferences go. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some close to bankruptcies for some of these companies that put on conferences as their primary business. If you look at Gartner, for example, I think they said they'll lose over $300 million from the canceled conferences this year. Pretty significant. I don't think their conference business will go away, but that's just something to think about and really puts it into perspective. So I think it's a good thing that less conferences, more meaningful conferences, and I think it will eventually pick back up. And I think the second thing is that I think most people are slightly wrong about what they say is that this is the new normal, because if this was the new normal, we haven't had anything like this for quite some time, maybe never, right? But we've had significant events that have changed the way, society works and society behaves. And look, from 2 years from now, it'll be back to normal. And while you may have, I think, a lot of more people working from home, I think there's a lot of businesses that still thrive and want to be in the office. Like I said, you said I work from home for a little bit. I like the opportunity to go into an office because just sitting at home all the time sucks.
In your opinion, what are some of the biggest areas that will change, that will be some of the biggest challenges that we should prep for? I mean, connectivity, for instance. I mean, you're a ninja.
Network ninja.
Don't say ninja. That's like the worst thing to say about anybody. That's Phil's just showing his age. He's just proving that he doesn't know that it's outdated anymore. We laugh at those people who write their network ninja in their LinkedIn profile or their Twitter bio.
What do you believe are the biggest challenges our industry will face in the next 3 to 5 years, considering what we just talked about? from latency, network, any limitations that will potentially arise with more people working from home or anywhere?
I got to say, first, I don't know. Mobile data traffic is on its way back down to normal almost. And, while there's still some spikes of traffic, I think maybe one of the biggest things is actually, the transformation of networking that to more of a cloud-like service. Software eats networking and all this. I mean, networking is last like always. Software has began eating every other industry for some time, right? And there might be a few industries left. Maybe government will be last. Networking won't be completely last. But those are really, I think, there's the two big things. It's really just, software and, on-demand models.
So have you come across any of these 5G theories, 5G being the root cause of coronavirus and the Europeans just burning off those cell sites? And
yeah.
If so, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I remember back in March, I was talking with a friend, and I had come across some folks on Twitter talking about Wuhan being the first 5G deployment site, and it's no coincidence that that's where coronavirus originated. And and this is back in March. So when I saw this news, I'm like, oh my God, this just got out of control. It's ridiculous. And, I think the one thing that's concerning is more the safety and well-being of the folks working for these ISPs that have to climb those towers and the technicians that are out there when people are lighting towers on fire. And there's some crazy stuff. I saw a video the other day, a guy, he stole a tank, an army tank, and drove it into towers. Yeah. in England. Yeah. In the UK.
Exactly. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, those are the people that think the earth is flat.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what people were doing? But is that what people were doing? Like when, during the Industrial Revolution, where they're like, no car factories. We want the horses. And were they blowing up car factories or, microwave factories? Because, the microwave is going to get all the nutrients out of the food. Should that have been expected in the evolution of industry, that people just don't like change?
I mean, I would have expected it more to happen in America than anywhere else, but we might as well merge with the UK these days and become one.
I'm not going to go into this political.
I mean, you are thousands of miles off the mainland, dude. Where you live, I know it's America, but I'm not sure it's America.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Trump never said anything about building walls in Hawaii.
That's true. Probably because he thinks it's part of a different country.
Exactly. Yeah, we are the 52nd state. Yeah. What gets you excited about technology, Christian? And what kind of technology interests you? What are you looking at for yourself and for your career for the upcoming few years?
Yeah, so I like edge computing, actually, not to be confused with, micro edge data centers or, fake news edge computing, because there's a lot of that out there. Edge computing, though, as in the kind of stuff that Cloudflare is doing with their workers and actually enabling developers to, push their code out to the edge. I think we're ways away before we actually see some significant traction there. And I think, you're going to see the folks like Cloudflare, become a lot more popular CDNs, before any of these other things do. But it's an interesting space. I think I did like augmented reality, and I think that's going to be bigger than virtual reality. But I actually I don't know if it's going to be that big anymore at all. But maybe the whole pandemic actually accelerates that with buying real estate, right? I mean, renting a new apartment. These are things the people are still doing. I just was out on the street the other day and I saw someone moving in the building next door. So people still gotta get on with their lives. And if they had a move planned or they want to move, you're going to need a way to really, be able to tour a house or tour a property or whatnot. So that's kind of exciting. And other than that, I just think it's still super early for internet infrastructure and, these foundations that power podcasts like this and, video streaming for the kids like TikTok and YouTube and all this. But I tell you one thing I think that's really exciting from a high level is that I think during this pandemic, you're going to see a lot more businesses be born, and I think you're going to see a lot of people figure out how they can make money and how they can take advantage of the situation they're in. Whether they lost their jobs or they're furloughed or whatever the case, the passion economy is what, the investors are calling it, is doing a podcast, doing a newsletter, creating online courses. And there's so much of this out there. There's courses on productivity, how to be more productive, what apps to use, because there's so many tools and so many applications out there. So that's probably the top of the list. That's super interesting. And I love that you guys are doing a podcast. I love seeing more podcasts. I want to see more video. And just more content, if I go back on what we said for the younger people and, providing more opportunities for them to learn. This is it, right? It's the internet.
What's amazing is this idea that, when everybody got trapped in their homes with these stay-at-home orders, and it's essentially global, it actually made everything that much more accessible. So, the ability for me and Nabil to get on this thing and me to essentially be this far away from, being in Kona. Whereas before, the idea of us having this type of, conversation or interaction would have been bizarre to even schedule it unless there was like a specific business, meeting that we had to have about some particular solution that we were having. And that crosses all these different platforms. I mean, my kids are having, Zoom ballet class, Zoom soccer class. And, you can, if you're going to have those types of classes, you're no longer bound by whoever, the expert is in your particular neighborhood that's, within walking distance or within, a simple car ride. You now have this global accessibility to expertise. And I think, all great businesses are born because, they're solving a particular problem that exists. And, right now we have these generalized solutions to particular problems. My kids, are using Zoom all the time for online schooling, and they have additional apps like Seesaw and all these different things that are going to come out. But as we start embracing telemedicine and e-learning and all these things that I think to a certain extent are here to stay. This is the last 60 days have been the only times that my kids have consistently gotten to school on time. And it's because all we have to do is log into Zoom. And I'll say the other thing, which is it's the only way I've gotten my kids to consistently brush their teeth in the morning, because I put on a mask and they have to smell their own breath. So I assume that, the dental profession is gonna have a significant boon as well, or maybe a bust, because everyone's gonna take care of their teeth. That's the thing that I think is just so exciting with what apps are gonna become, specifically targeted towards all of the different areas of our lives that are now going to be enabled by the internet. And the internet used to just be this thing that we used, to play games, and then it became this production enablement tool where people embrace, using email versus using snail mail and all that. And now it's just, the entirety of the world. Nabil talks about digital transformation all the time. It's just going to be so real time that it's going to be, there are benefits to it. There are elements of it that are liberating. And there's, some scariness to it as well in terms of our ability to maintain, as Nabil likes to call it, the life-work balance, as I like to call it, because I'm in New York, the work-life balance. But that's the thing. Do you find yourself working more than you would have otherwise because everybody else is just sitting at home, contacting you constantly? I know you work from home typically, but do you find that, with all of your extracurricular activities, with all of your stuff happening remotely and not being, meeting at a bar and stuff, you find yourself essentially working in not your personal life as much as just, in whatever you call your varying professional existence?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Whether it's, day job that pays the bills, or, working on NINOG, or continuing to do research and expand my newsletter. And, I definitely am working more, and, you're not getting out to go to the gym. You're not getting out to go to dinner. You're not getting out to go to bars. It's funny, I was thinking as you were talking and thinking back about, what Nabil said about, things, he thinks that things really will change. And I kind of thought about, what, I think there are some aspects that really will be the new normal. And I started thinking about the yoga thing. Why would you go and spend time going to a yoga class if you can throw it on your, TV or a projector in your apartment and do it over Zoom with maybe an awesome yoga instructor from Thailand or Indonesia or wherever, and kind of even bring in more cultural experiences that way. But then I kind of just thought back, as you mentioned, as you started talking, was that, I think, and I don't think it's going to be this way for the whole world, but I think people are going to just be like, you know what, I'm tired of being home. I want to go back to what I knew. Maybe it won't happen with a lot of people. And, I think there are some areas that will change, but,
I'll take the buzzwords thing. Christian, I know you love buzzwords. You're Mr. Buzzword. Every foundation newsletter is just buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. Hybrid, edge, multi-cloud, blah, blah, blah. What are your feelings on buzzwords?
No, look, I mean, I think there's a lot of buzzwords that have a place. And, I know there's a lot of people that poke at digital transformation as one of them, but I like the word, and I think it's a real thing and completely agree with it. And, if you paid attention to a lot going on over the last month or two, we saw comments from, the CEO of Box and Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, who, kind of said what they're seeing is just a massive acceleration in companies realizing that we need to, put the pedal to the metal and, actually start accelerating our transformation. So that's one I don't mind. I'm kind of tired of hearing artificial intelligence because I think 80% of the people who say it actually don't really know what it means. And there's a whole bunch of things like that, right? 5G is 5G, but it's just continually super hyped and overused. And when there's something, ready for us, it will be cool to see, but I'm not holding my breath. I don't know. Machine learning is kind of fine. And there's other things that come along. Like I said before, the passion economy is what they're calling, the whole creating content online and creating paid newsletters and podcasts and things like that. I mean, not too bad.
I think in general, the buzzwords in and of themselves are fine because they were designed to try to succinctly communicate a trend that's happening. The problem with them is they get taken over by marketing forces within organizations, and they lose all their meaning because they just start using the word digital transformation to mean let's upgrade the printer. Or, it just becomes not necessarily about what the initial goal was when creating it. It loses all meaning. The word cloud lost all meaning. The world, even Internet of Things to a certain extent. I mean, that kind of thing just it's what people glom onto eventually because that aren't necessarily, talking about the same thing that all of us would necessarily think they're talking about.
A part of the challenge is buzzwords, when they originally started, they had the right meaning to it. They had the right foundation to it. It just got into the wrong people's hand. Marketing, for instance, being one, and everybody trying to ride that coattail of it, right? I've been talking about digital transformation or artificial intelligence for a long time. And Christian, to your point, 80%, my God, man, you're very generous when you say 80% of the people probably don't have an understanding. I think it's like the 95 percentile that does not know
right.
what AI really means. Talk a little bit more about these buzzwords. I mean, what else have you encountered? What else besides machine learning, AI, 5G, edge, cloud that have actually really caught your attention as being a lot of hype or a false?
This is your chance. This is your chance, Christian. Let it loose.
Look, there's not really that many, man. I mean, look, my focus is while I'm interested and curious in a lot of things, doing and curating this newsletter has really helped me just kind of push all the junk to the side and just not focus on it the same way. Like I kind of ignore political climate and mainstream news and things like that. So I actually don't know a lot of them. There's a few, but I don't know, micro data centers and this whole thing I wish would just go away. I don't know. What else is there?
How about containerization?
No, legit. And, big focus on the enterprise cloud journey. I think it's a great innovation.
Oh my God, I was reading so soft. You've gone so soft.
Yeah. I just try to stay, there's just a lot of that mainstream stuff I try to stay away from. Look, if I was into that, I would go work at Gartner. But,
really have a bone to pick with Gartner. We're going to get a cease and desist.
You can beep it out if you're worried about
no, any press is good press. Are you kidding me? I need that.
No, okay. Look, it's not Gartner. I don't mean to pick on them. There's a bunch of big research and advisory companies like that come up with, Deloitte, and a lot of these guys are also, just as much to blame for pushing a lot of the buzzwords that you end up not liking. But I'm in full agreement. Like both you, Phil, and Nabil mentioned, is they had a legit purpose. And you can blame the journalists and you can blame the marketers for just leaning too much on these analysts and these research companies, and also just not understanding or not taking the time to understand what it actually means and then talk about it in a meaningful context.
I'm going to throw out a couple of more buzzwords. Hyper-automation, real, fake. Okay. Connected retail, real, fake.
I think I've heard about it, but I would have more thought that a connected real estate is another one that's probably in the same bucket, though.
Quantum computing,
legit.
Voice as user interface, WUI.
I never heard that one, but I am a big fan of voice and voice interface.
Blockchain.
No.
All right, the Christian Koch blockchain is a no. Look, stop using blockchain.
It's hard. I'm just not a big fan. I don't care about it. I know there's a lot of people who really believe in it. There's a lot of people who think they're going to change the internet and create a new internet by using blockchain.
Does anybody really know what it is? I mean, I get the sense that people use it to say that they're inventing something that is unique. They're talking about a process that is already invented 30 times over. But in order to attract some investors, they throw the word blockchain in front of it. And somehow, it gets people to think that it's, some new way of decentralizing blah, blah, blah. But is that it?
Look, I don't know. I'm going to probably start a company next year, and it's probably going to be based on artificial blockchain.
Yeah. Artificial blockchain newsletters.
I'm just kidding. Look, I think there's some interesting use cases for blockchain, but I don't know how far into this are we now? Over a decade. Right. And some things are popping up. I mean, look, you've got the interest of people, right? Facebook's Libra just took a C-level from HSBC, I think, to be the CEO of the Libra project. So there are people in banking. Warren Buffett just said on his, the Berkshire annual call this past weekend, I guess it was, that he bought a bunch of Bitcoin or something.
Well, went to 10,000 again, so that must be
he dumped all of his airline stock, every single one, and he bought Bitcoin.
That's a bleep. All right, so from a futurist perspective, here's top 10 trends from Gartner on some of the buzzwords. Hyper-automation, real or fake?
Fake.
Multi-experience, real or fake?
Stupid.
Democratization.
That's it. That's the buzzword. Fake.
I think as it relates to data, I guess. I don't know.
Yes. Human augmentation.
Fake.
Transparency and traceability.
I mean, these. I don't know. No.
And I'm pretty sure you're gonna love this one. The empowered edge.
Empowered edge. What makes it different from the artificial edge?
There is none, but they believe that it's a buzzword for 2023.
Yeah.
Let's set a calendar date to do another version of this podcast and see where we are with the empowered edge.
Yeah. With Christian Koch being the CEO of Empowered Edge LLC.
Yeah, the distributed cloud.
No.
Autonomous anything.
I mean, that's just like, hey, autonomy's automation is cool. Let's just throw it against everything. No.
Okay, and I think this one is going to be your favorite one as well. Practical blockchain.
Practical blockchain. Whoever created that can go self.
Last but not least, AI security.
Artificial intelligence security. We're going to secure the things we don't know about. Okay. Yeah. Man, that is some list. That's a Gartner list.
That is a Gartner list, published on October 21st of 2019.
Christian is accelerating his plans for Gartner's bankruptcy.
Okay, so there's a couple other things, Christian, like to get your take on. Again, your opinions. 5G as a catalyst, real or fake?
Depends. A catalyst to what?
To anything. I mean, VR to AR to IoT.
Eventually.
Okay. AI as a service. I mean, since we've been following SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, whatever the case might be, is AI as a service of the future?
No.
Well, this is great. Last thoughts, last words that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, keep watching these guys. I think it's an awesome podcast. It was definitely probably the most fun podcast that I've done. Even though I hate being on podcasts and I hate being on video. It was super fun. Go subscribe to my newsletter. It's foundations.email. Stay curious.
This has been great. Nothing lasts forever. Markets will come back, currencies will rebound, businesses will go on, and we'll all move on. That could happen next week, next month, or next year. I'm confident that those who prepare rather than panic will come out of this stronger. Thank you for joining us. This has been brought to you by Nomad Futurist. Check us online at nomadfuturist.com.